Hello and welcome to the OTB channel. Have you been looking at getting a status bar configured for DWM? Or have you struggled with the process? Are you trying to get it to display coloured emojis or coloured text on your status bar? Well, these are some of the things that I've been wrangling with over the last week or so. So I'm going to go through the process that I went through, and you may well find it useful. See you after the intro. Okay, welcome back. So status bars, they seem to have been the bane of my life as I've been trying these different window managers. The window managers themselves have been relatively straightforward to configure, with the possible exception of Xmonad. But every single window manager that I've looked at, the status bar has been something that needed some work and I needed to figure out. And that's been no different with DWM. I finally, though, have come up with a solution to get a nice status bar showing with coloured icons. I'm actually using coloured emojis, and I'm really happy with the result. So I thought for this video, as I tend to do with this channel, I'll take you through what I've been doing, and please feel free to steal any of the ideas, because I can guarantee I've involved myself in lots of very legal but legal skullduggery in terms of stealing other people's ideas and other people's scripts in order to make this work correctly for me. So yeah, let's go to the desktop. Right, so you should all see in front of you my desktop, and you'll see that my status bar for DWM is actually displaying a number of status items. This is actually on my Void Linux distribution. I do also have a version installed on my Arch distribution, and they are different. So I'm going to show you both, but let me start off with this one. So you can see here on my bar, I've got a relatively simple status line here. I've got today's date. I've got a little spanner with the number 17 next to it, and that's how many updates I've got. I've got the temperature here of my CPUs, or the average temperature of my CPUs, and you've just seen it change there. My network up and down speed, the RAM I'm using. I've got quite a few files open, including OBS. That's why it's at 1.3 gig. I've got the CPU speed, and I've got the temperature outside. Okay, so when you first install DWM, you're not going to have any of these items there. And unlike some of the other window managers you can get, there aren't modules included that you can auto-configure. If you want to display some status items, you have to do it yourself, and you have to do it yourself with the xset-root command, but we'll come back to that. But all you'll initially have will be not even the date. There'll just be a little item over on the top right that tells you what DWM version you're using. So, how did I go about basically putting together a status bar script, and what have I ended up with and why? Well, let's just move over to a terminal. I have a folder on my system called DWM scripts. And if I just do an ls, you'll see that that is full of a whole range of files, and most of these are scripts that I use for the status bar. So DWM disk, for instance, that you can see, outputs this. In fact, if I just run that script now, you can see that it outputs to the terminal pretty much what's up here on the bar. And if I just open that up, you can see what it consists of. Basically, it's a command. It uses the df-h command and a bit of awk magic to actually produce this 39 gigs and this 21% used. It then has another variable below where I've just pasted in an awesome icon that I want to use. And then I use the printf command to output the result. So a couple of things here. I am not a programmer, and although I can follow the logic of Bash, I would rarely write a script that I had put together from scratch. Quite the opposite. All of my scripts I have stolen, borrowed, used bits of other people's scripts that they've been using for their status bars or to do various things. And that's what most people do, if the truth be known. And you build up a collection. And I'm constantly coming across changes to the commands that I'm using to display different items, and I'm tinkering with the scripts all the time just to make them a little bit more, well, to fit around exactly what I want. So none of the scripts necessarily look like anybody else's, but the commands that I've stolen are just that. They're the result of theft. So it's a little bit of status bar chicanery, if you like. Now, the exact format that I've got here has changed quite significantly. The reason being, I initially found the status bar was actually quite slow. And when I had a go at adding colours to it, which we'll come back to in a second, it was slowing everything down to a crawl. So I did a search, and I came out with quite a few people saying, well, if you're using echo commands, you need to swap over to printf. It's more efficient, less problem prone, etc., etc. It may or may not be true, but anyway. So I thought, okay, well, all of my scripts at the time were just echoing the output. And I thought, well, I'll convert them all to printf. Wasn't sure how to do that initially. And again, I got the answer from the internet. It was actually DT's website, distrotube.com. He has an article on how to configure DWM blocks, and he gave an example of a script where he was using printf. So that gave me a start, and then after reading the man pages, etc., I started to use that. Didn't make any difference with the colours, I have to say, and it's made no noticeable difference as far as the script running from what I can tell, but, you know, hey-ho, it doesn't really matter, it works. What DT was doing, though, he was actually creating a separate variable for the icon that he was pasting in. So that makes it really easy to just echo or printf the output. It's literally, I want the icon first, followed by the result of this command. And that's exactly what you're getting. So they were the scripts. And putting the scripts together is all very well, but you then have to decide how you're going to display them in your status bar. One way that quite a few people use who don't use LightDM or some other login manager is that they'll just put the commands straight into their xinitrc file, and that's one way of doing it. I didn't particularly want to do that. I wanted to keep them as scripts in their own right because I'm constantly changing them and playing around with them, and I wanted to be able to swap and change as I saw fit. There was another reason, though, for having all these scripts as separate entities in their own right, and that was because I initially decided that I would give something called DWM blocks a go. So let me just cd to my DWM blocks directory and cat blocks.h. So, okay, just doing a cat or all the alignment's gone out a bit, but it doesn't matter. So what you do with this, it's really incredibly simple to set up. Essentially, you already have a template there. And all you do, the first lot of speech marks, you can leave them empty, and that's what I've done. Or you can actually paste in the icon that you want to use. I didn't need to use this section because I have the icons in all my individual scripts. You then point the second section to the script that you want to use. So you can see, have I got the DWM disk here? Yeah, there we are, DWM disk that we've just been looking at. I don't have to put the full path in because the DWM scripts directory is in my path anyway. And the first, if you just take this one down here, this is probably easy to see. The first section after the name of the script is the update interval in seconds. So what I've wanted to do for the clock, I thought, well, every minute it can update. It doesn't need to update every couple of seconds. So I'll just put 60 seconds. Update yourself every 60 seconds. For the disk command, well, my disk space isn't going to change that often. So I thought 3,600 seconds, well, that's an hour. If it checks once an hour, that's more than enough as far as I'm concerned. And the same for the updates command. But things like the temperature and the network and the CPU speed, etc., I've put down as 5 or 10 seconds. All good. It's the next section where I've struggled to really get a grip on. This next section is about an update signal. Now, my understanding is that you can give each of these scripts a number, which is the update signal identifier, if you like, that you're going to use. You can then attach commands to such things as your volume up, volume down buttons to send a signal to dwmblocks so that it will immediately update. So a good example that I've seen is for people who have a volume status on their DWM bar, and they might have the volume only updating itself every 60 seconds, or in fact not at all. But they will have some signal number here, which is linked to their scripts to make their volume icons go up and down. And as soon as dwmblocks receives that signal, it will instantly refresh what the output was. I had a real struggle getting to grips with this, so I've just put 0 on all of mine. That might be right, that might be wrong, doesn't really matter. But actually, the main problem that I had with dwmblocks was not that it didn't work like that. It worked beautifully. In fact, it outputted exactly what you see here in exactly the same format. The problem was I started to notice that every half hour or so, I'd look at the clock and I'd think, is that all the time is? It hasn't updated. And it had crashed in the background and I had to restart it. Now, doing some reading around, that seems to be due to dwmblocks receiving some sort of signal from somewhere that's caused it to crash because it doesn't recognize it. I don't know. Bottom line is that wasn't going to work for me if it was constantly going to crash. So I decided that what I would do instead was go old school and just put a bash script together to output what you see on that status bar there through the old method using the xsetroot command. So it's a shame about dwmblocks, and I'm sure there's something I'm missing as far as perhaps how to configure it properly. I fully accept I could have been doing something wrong, but if it had just worked out of the box, I probably would have left it at that. But as it happened, it was causing more problems for me to do it that way than perhaps just put a script together. The downside, of course, to not using DWM blocks was the fact that one of the things I liked about it was you could set a different refresh interval for each script, because you're not going to want to update, I don't know, the hard disk space every couple of seconds, but you are going to want to do that with something like your CPU speed or your network up and down speed. And generally speaking, with a script, you'll just have one sleep command after all the scripts have run. So they'll all run again at exactly the same time. So I thought, well, is there a way around it? And I found a post on the Bunsen Labs forum, and I'll just go to the combined screen here, by someone calling themselves ClusterF. And they've done a little bash script here where they've done a double loop, essentially. They've done the first loop, which is their time command, where they run it once a minute, so it sleeps for 60 seconds and runs again. And that command is not output to the DWM status bar, but it's output to a temporary file. They've then done the second loop with all the rest of their status commands, and that has a sleep every 10 seconds. So it loops through that section of commands every 10 seconds. But when it does that, the date command, which they've called local time here, it just reads from that temporary file that was created on that first loop. So in essence, even though it is updating the thing like date every 10 seconds, all it's doing is reading in a file that's already sat there. So I thought, right, okay, well, let's see if I can put something similar together and use that. So based on that script, I put my own version together, which you should see on the screen now, with this double loop. What I'm doing here is I'm taking my weather script and my update script, and I'm outputting them to a text file in the DWM scripts directory. That's only going to run once an hour. And then I've got this second loop where I've got weather, CPU, memory, net, temperature, the disk script, the update script, and the time. Most of these are just calling on the scripts that I've put together, but the weather and the update script are just reading from that text file that gets created once an hour. I've then used xset-root, and I've just listed all the different variables that I want to output onto the bar, as that's the way you do it with DWM. You use this xset-root-name and then whatever you want to output. So, you could even output text, xset-root-name and then question marks, this is my bar, or something like that. So, great, all good. And I basically link this script to the startup script that I have. You could equally put it in initRC or whatever you use to start DWM. And hey-ho, it works wonderfully. So, all good. I've got a status bar going. What do I do next? Well, the next stage of the status bar blingification, of course, is I quite fancied having some colour on the bar. Perhaps just to turn the icons a different colour and to keep the text as is. So I patched DWM with the coloured status text patch, and all seemed to work pretty good. Part of what this does is it updates your config file. Let me just show you that. So you should see now a shot of my config.h file, and you'll see that it's added a range of different colours there. Well, I've added the colours in, but it's given me the ability to add them. So green, red, yellow, orange, and purple. And I've also been able to create a number of new schemes. So how many have I got here? 8. Yellow is number 4. And let me show you how, using the patch, you're meant to actually apply this. Let me go to my DWM scripts directory and let's have a look. Let's go back to that hard disk drive one. So if I use vim DWM disk, there we go. So you'll see the script in front of you. Let me just make that bigger. What you have to do is you use non-printing characters. And if you use the printf command, you essentially have to top and tail the different sections of the output with whatever colors you want them to be. So this first S, %S, actually refers to this first string item, which is the icon. So if I wanted to turn that, for instance, yellow, all good. What I would do is I would insert a backslash followed by X followed by 04. I would then need to make sure that at the end that the HD part doesn't actually change color. In fact, let me show you what happens if I just keep it to that one command, \X04, and I save that file and we wait for it to update. Yeah, there you go. You can see up here on the bar, everything from the disk onwards across the bar has now updated and it's showing yellow. If I just wanted to isolate the color to the disk image, that's straightforward enough. Again, you would just send it back to normal, which in this case would be X01. And in fact, I've put it in the wrong place. There, I've turned the whole of that yellow. If I wanted to change that completely, let's just get rid of that. I would just put it here, X01. Let's just save that. And there you are. It's updated almost immediately. And I've just got the icon turning yellow. So I thought to myself, okay, that's all good. I created a few color schemes and I started to apply different colors to these different icons. And this is where I had a problem. My system started to grind to a halt. It wasn't showing a high CPU speed. It wasn't using a huge amount of RAM. The CPU temperature didn't seem to be going up, but it was taking 2 or 3 seconds even for a terminal to launch. Whenever I removed the color codes, the system returned to normal. Now, it didn't do it initially while I was starting to add the colors. It seemed to take 2 or 3 colors okay without too much of a problem. But as I started to add a different color to each icon, it just ground this. It was unusable. So I hit Google and I found quite a few people have suffered this problem, and I came up with various modifications to the patch to try and to fiddle about with, all of which I applied, none of which made a blind bit of difference. So for Void Linux, that's where it was left. So I tried to do this again on Arch Linux. I had exactly the same problem. And how to troubleshoot something like this, I really don't know. I haven't got any answers from out there on the odd post that I've done to see if anybody else has come up with a result. And maybe it's something about my configuration that's causing the problems. I don't know. But it seemed clear that this color patch wasn't going to work as I wanted it to. So I accepted that what I've got at the moment, the black and white, I may actually be stuck with. Didn't turn out to be the case, though, because what the workaround that I discovered was actually using colored emoticons instead of the awesome icons. It won't work on Void because you need a patch version of libxft, and it's not available on Void. I suppose I could compile it myself, and I may well do that in the future, but it does work on Arch. So let me reboot, let me move over to my Arch system. you'll see exactly what I mean. Right, so we're back on my Arch system now, and hopefully you can see my desktop. We're using the same wallpaper, but you can see my status bar there. And I'm using, I think it's Joy Pixels, their emoji set. And you can see that they are displaying correctly. And it looks, well, to my mind, it looks really good. I've got a little cloud with the sun coming out behind it to show the weather. Probably pretty much describes British weather most of the time. Rare that we haven't got clouds in the sky. I've got the CPU speed with the little picture of a computer, a brain emoji for the RAM, network up and down arrows, that's fine. CPU, average temperature, and the disk space, a little icon of a floppy, and some spanners and a hammer crossed for tools, in other words, to show that how many updates are waiting. There's 96 here. How did I do this? Well, essentially I have the Rofi emoji package installed, which allows me to bring up all the different emojis on the system. And so I can even search. So I can search for something like disk, and it'll bring up a picture of a floppy disk. I just have to hit OK, and it gets copied to the clipboard. I can then just copy it to wherever. Unfortunately, the Alacrity terminal doesn't show up coloured icons, I'm afraid. But neither here nor there. And what I essentially ended up doing, if I just go back into my DWM scripts, if I can spell DWM scripts, and I open up that disk script that you saw before, I essentially pasted in the icon into Vim. And all was good, or at least it was eventually. Initially, the icons were showing on the status bar, but they were just in grayscale in black and white. So what I needed to do was install a package. And the package that I had to install was this one here, libxft-bgra, which is a patch version of the libxft library, which allows for the rendering and scaling of coloured emoji, for want of a better description. It does ask to remove the standard library if you install it, but all seems good. So I installed that, and I tried again, still no joy. Still, I got grayscale icons. So back to Google, did a search, and what you know, I came up with an answer. I'm going back to the combined screen now. Luke Smith had usefully provided the answer in a video he did a while ago. I'll include a link in the video description to this video. What you have to do is you have to remove a section of code in one of your DWM files. He talks about it on here. There's a section of code that does not allow you to use coloured fonts. And that's there as a workaround because clearly the developers knew that there were going to be problems with the standard libxft just trying to display it, and it could cause crashes. So essentially you remove this whole section of code, restart DWM, and hey-ho, it works. So that was the process. And I've finally got a status bar that I really like. I had to hack around a bit and use other people's ideas, but it's all out there, guys. You just have to be good at searching. And I finally got it working and looking as I want. I'm a bit gutted that I can't get it working on Void at the moment. And I'm not quite sure how I would compile it in Void with their package system, but I am going to explore that. But I'm really happy with it on Arch, and I'm not unhappy with the black and white icons on Void. I just would like a bit more. So that's the process I went through. As normal, it's the status bars that have caused me the most problems with all the window managers I've tried. Having said that, I've used variations of the scripts I'm using here for all the status bars so far that I've used. So if you're going to start exploring window managers, get yourself some scripts as well. All of mine are on my GitLab page. Feel free to steal them. I have no problem with people using them and improving them, as I'm sure is possible. So that's all for today, guys. I hope you have a great weekend. The weather seems to have broken a little bit here, and it's been thundering and lightning and bucketing down with rain. But to be honest, it should clear the air a little bit. So, yeah, all good. Don't forget to join me on Library. Come and join the Facebook book group, and have a great weekend.